Hey, sorry about the lack of an E3 focused wallpaper, but you see, I was trying to look for an E3 wallpaper to use for my PC here on the monitor, but the closest thing I could find to a good one was this 1080p wallpaper from like 2015, and if you know anything about 4K, you know that something that's 1080p for a wallpaper looks like complete shit on that sort of monitor, so unfortunately for this video, we're gonna have to stick to the classic outer space theme, even though this is the first time I've ever had it presented on the channel. I mean, it was either that or an image of Anthem for a background, and I know nobody likes Anthem, so I think it's best that we avoid that altogether. But I digress about that. For today, I want to talk about something that's, just like with Halo Infinite's marketing, has been on my mind for quite a while, and that being the whole state of E3. Not just for 2020 and beyond, specifically this year though, but just E3 as an entity these last few years, because at this point, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to know that E3 really isn't in the best state as of now. It hasn't been in a good state for the last few years, really. Mainly because of a whole bunch of different factors, especially now this year with a certain virus going around. And that's something I really want to talk about, so I guess let's just go back a few years. So going back to E3 2017, since I would say that E3 was still pretty good up until 2016. Starting in 2017, it seems like that's when it started slowly becoming irrelevant. I believe that's the year when EA officially pulled out and began focusing on their own events, even though their own events take place during the same time as E3, which kind of defeats the purpose, but at the same time doesn't, because it no doubt saves them money. Instead of having to spend all this money on a conference for E3, instead they can just make their own event and save a lot more, most likely. And something I've noticed since then is that there's been a bit of a pattern. Now, 2018 I would say was the outlier to what I'm talking about, because that year was honestly really good. I do have some fond memories when I think back to E3 2018. I think that was a good time for the Expo. But things really start getting bad with 2019. A lot of this having to do with Sony pulling out, which at the time did make a lot of sense because they said it themselves, they really had nothing new to present, and going on and doing a conference for 2019, it would have just been more of the same that we had already seen probably dozens of times by that point with games like Spider-Man, Last of Us Part 2. Yeah, Spider-Man was already out by that point, but you get what I mean. They would have just shown more of the same shit. So, Sony pulling out, that made total sense. I got that. I wasn't bothered by that. But now you have E3 2020, the year where Sony is most likely going to be releasing a new console. You'd think that they would go to E3 to show off this new console because that's where it'd get the most amount of attention and marketing. But no, they're not going to E3 again. This is the second time that they're skipping. 2 times in a row now. The fact that they're not presenting a brand new system for the next generation of consoles at E3 of all events should really say a whole lot about the current state of E3. And that's not even just including companies slowly pulling out more and more. There's also things like lack of attendance and how they decided to completely open everything up back in 2017, which only led to a whole lot of issues because it was just so fucking crowded. And on top of that, you have all these leaks coming in for pretty much every single game that's meant to be a surprise now. Like, I believe that with Rage 2, it was Walmart that just so happened to somehow leak the game before it was meant to be properly revealed, which Bethesda then gave them shit for during their E3 conference of 2018, I think. Like, at this point, so much shit has happened with E3 over these last few years and all these games coming out that it's hard to keep track of what came out when exactly. So, just bear with me here. We don't do proper research here on Michi Major. We go right off the top of our heads and talk straight out of our asses. So, if you don't like that, then, you know, I completely understand, and I hope that you find something that really suits your sort of interest in YouTube content. No, but seriously though, all these factors that I've mentioned, it just made E3 feel less and less special over these last few years or so. It's made it feel less and less like the special Super Bowl of gaming and more just like an event that companies are now starting to show up out of obligation, which they probably already were to an extent, but it felt like they really had a purpose to be there at the same time, you know what I mean? Again, it's always been seen as the Super Bowl of gaming for the past 20 or so years at this point, that showing up, it just always used to fill you with that sense of hype and excitement to see what would be revealed, what surprises would come out of companies' conferences, what they would show off, what games they would reveal, what new trailers they would show for coming projects, the start of brand new console generations, and really hyping up the releases. A lot of that is just gone now. The internet now being so prevalent, it makes E3 just feel irrelevant, because really, what's the point of going to this big event where you have to most likely spend millions of dollars to get a conference set up, when instead you can just reveal a trailer or gameplay for a brand new game that's coming out online on Twitter or Facebook or just any social media platform, not having to even spend a dime. You see what I mean? What's the point of spending all this money when you can just share a video on YouTube or Twitter? You know, the convenience factor there, it's extremely strong, and in terms of saving money for companies, it's just smarter all around. And really, we're not too far off from that point, unfortunately. For better or for worse, E3 is probably not going to be around that much longer. Oh, and something else I forgot to mention was all this personal information of 2,000 journalists that have gone to E3 in the past, all having their personal information leaked, which is no doubt only going to hurt E3 even more in the future. And in general, you have this whole virus situation going on now, which is most likely going to affect this year's E3, because there's a good chance that the event's going to be postponed or straight up canceled. And I would say that the latter of the two is the most likely of the two options, because when it comes to postponing E3, it's like, at that point, what's the point of even having an event? And let's say this does happen for sure, and the event is straight up canceled, or at the least is just postponed for whatever reason to whatever future date. At that point, since there really wouldn't be any sort of event, it would lead to a lot of different companies pulling out. And that would mean they'd most likely have to host their own events. And when they see just how much money that they're saving from doing that, what point will there be in them ever coming back to E3? I mean, sure, they could still host some sort of event similar to how Nintendo does it, but at that point, why not just do it the same way that Sony is doing it now? It just makes more sense, and having things more sprawled out throughout the year, it allows more breathing room for each event that each company would do, allowing them to have more spotlight and attention on their own event, as opposed to everyone doing it at the exact same time because of one particular conference event. And honestly, I'm ready for when that day comes, because E3, it just hasn't been the same, aside from 2018, that was the one exception to the rule. But when that day does come, even though I'm ready, at the same time, I'm definitely gonna miss it. And I'm sure that a whole lot of other people are definitely gonna miss E3 too, because say what you will, but it's become such a mainstay and staple of gaming over these last few decades that it being gone now, it'd be a pretty big shakeup for the industry, no doubt. And honestly, even though E3 can be really cringy and have a bunch of stupid shit that nobody cares about, at the same time, in a lot of ways, I'm gonna miss that when E3's gone, because even though a lot of it was cringe, that cringe really added to E3's charm, I think. It gave it a lot more and helped it stand out, I want to say. It just did a lot more for it, it made it more memorable, and it led to a lot of really good compilations, which are now gonna be gone, because you can't have any cringy compilations when there's no cringe in the first place. That sounded probably much pseudo-deeper than it should have, and sounded much dumber because of that. I just really need to stop. So yeah, that's how I think E3's really lost its magic over the years, but that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I know that what I've said in this video has been regurgitated 1,000 times at this point, but I still wanted to say something myself, because as someone who cares a lot about gaming, I also care a lot about E3. So I just wanted to give a few words in it, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for the next video. But until then, I'm out. Later.